Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Kenneth Kam. I'm a lutenist and a guitarist, and this is the first in a series of videos designed to learn the basics of Renaissance Lute. Today's topic is how to tune Renaissance Lute. To begin with, let's take a look at what do you need. You will need a Renaissance Lute, of course. If you don't have a lute and you are planning to purchase one, or you have no idea where to purchase one, let me offer you an option. You can go to the Lute Society of America's website, sign up your own membership. There is a lute rental program in which you can pay $55 per month to rent your own lute. How awesome is that? And secondly, we need an app called ClearTune. Now, unfortunately, this app is not free, so you will have to pay $399 to get this app. This is a very important tuning app for tuning the lute, so go get it. Let's move on to the second part, tuning. If you are a guitarist, you might ask, what is the difference between tuning a guitar and the Renaissance Lute? Aren't they the same? Shouldn't we be just using a tuner to tune each string's tuning, and that's it? Well, the answer is actually quite complicated. To begin with, let's take a look at tuning charts. Here's a 6-course Renaissance lute. In general, the stringing of lutes in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, the technology of string making dictating the kind of stringing they use. In the 16th century, string making technology in general was not able to produce the lowest bass strings in very clear pitches. Look at the chart. The first course is a single string called chanterelle, as it was called the singing string, the Gesangseite in German. It is clear and more resonant and sustained in one single string. The second and the third courses are always double and tuned in unison. You will have no problem with an D and A in unison. You can hear the pitch perfectly. The F starts to become a bit more difficult to hear. Same thing with the fifth, the C, a bit fussier. They decided that the way to make the pitches clear on the fourth, fifth, sixth courses of the standard 6-course Renaissance lute was to, instead of tuning to unisons, they tune in octaves. This is documented clearly in the sources of what they were doing. Not only it adds clarity, but more notes. Playing 6 pitches but playing 3 courses because of the octave doublings. It provides richer and more sonorous sound. The use of the octaves gives you an extra voice, and it is very important contrapuntally in cadences. It turns out that the use of the octaves is very important contrapuntally in a lot of the music, especially in the first 3 quarters of the 16th century. Let's move on to take a look at the 8-course Renaissance lute. As the string making technology improved and they could make clearer and clearer 4th-course strings, gradually they dropped the octaves on the 4th but kept it on 5th and 6th. And then gradually in some places, they dropped the octaves on the 5th course as the technology permitted a clear 5th course. Dowland must have octaves on at least 7th and 8th. And when he went to 9-course lute, 9th. And probably on the 6th as well. For Elizabethan music, octaves are on 6th, 7th, and 8th course. For earlier repertoire, octaves doubling on 4th, 5th, and 6th course. Pieces of John Johnson and Francesco da Milano would have been written for 6-course lute with octaves. If you try to play their music on 8-course lute, the result is too dull without the octave strings to really work. And it will sound better with octave stringing and not as quite colorful on the 6-course lute. This is a very complicated situation. When the 10th-course lute was introduced to France, all the surviving descriptions say that they have an octave on the 5th course. There are different octave stringing for different repertoire. For lute player playing a recital that starts with Dauser or Spinacino in the early 16th century and finishes with Dowland or Robert Johnson, you would really need to have 2 different instruments with 2 different stringings for it to work. Now that we know that there are different types of Renaissance lutes for different repertoires, let's move on to the next part, in which I will use the ClearTune to tune my 8-course Renaissance lute. Prior to the late 19th century, there were no universally recognized pitch standards. One could travel from one part of Europe or from one city to another and find music being made at different pitches. Pitch levels in the Renaissance and Middle Ages were similarly varied according to the location and historical period. One of the pitches used during the Renaissance period was A equal 415. 415 Hz is about a half step below the modern standard of A440. One of the good things about ClearTune is that you can choose different temperaments in the setting. Now let me walk you through how to do that. Once you download ClearTune from the App Store, you can go to the right bottom corner to go to Settings. You can change the A to 415, and then you can click Temperament. As you can see, there are many temperaments to choose from. Here, I would choose 1/6 mean tone. Now you're all set and ready to tune your lute. There are two ways to tune the lute. You can either pluck the string and let the tuner to tell you how far apart you are to the designated pitch, like what I am doing here. Or you can change the settings by choosing the right hand side for vertical lines and also clicking the button at the center. Now you will hear the tuner generating the sound of the specific pitches. You can then tune your lute to match the sound by ear. One thing that I would do in particular is to pluck all the open strings to make sure the courses are in tune to one another. Here I can hear a slight discrepancy between the two D strings in the second course. Therefore, I have to retune one of the D strings. If you haven't already realized, tuning an 8-course lute, meaning that you have to tune 15 strings, which is very time-consuming. If you are going to play a concert or attend a rehearsal, make sure you make extra time so that you have time to tune all the strings. To give you a rough estimation, here I spent at least 6 minutes to tune all 15 strings, and I consider this is quite a fast speed already. After tuning all the open strings, are we done yet? The answer is no. We also need to tune our movable gut frets. Here, let me explain it with a chart called Notes Produced at Each Lute Fret. In equal temperament, minor thirds are too flat, major thirds are too sharp, fourths are too flat, and fifths are too sharp. Basically, every interval in equal temperament is out of tune, except for unison and octave. The reason that lutes used gut frets was so you could move them around, so you could make the thirds and sixths in particular more beautiful. For instance, Dowland tries to explain his temperament in the variety of lute lessons. He was trying to make an English translation of the instruction published in 1536 by Hans Gerler, a Nuremberg lute player, and it's basically 1/6 mean tone temperament, 1/4 mean tone, which is what was used in the 16th century for keyboard tuning and recorder wind instrument tuning. 1/4 mean tone has acoustically pure major thirds and nearly acoustically pure minor thirds. That's really hard to do on the lute. With that temperament, certain keys sound really good. Other keys sound not so good. Since we're not using equal temperament but in historical tuning system, there is no such thing as enharmonic notes. For example, G sharp is not equal to A flat. D sharp is not equal to E flat. D sharp is flatter because it's a narrower major third in B major, and E flat is wide because it's a wider minor third in C minor. This will bring us two questions. First, how do we know where the fret positions should be located? And second, should I choose to put the frets near the sharp or the flat side? Well, let's take a look together. If I have a piece that's in A major or E major or B major, all those major thirds, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, they are all on the 6th fret. So I want a low position of the 6th fret. If I now want to play C minor chord, E flat doesn't sound very good. is not an E flat, but a D sharp. It doesn't sound very good. So I'll have to adjust the fret, and now the E flat is in tune. E major will sound terrible because I don't have a G sharp there anymore. I now have an A flat. If I try to play G major, that B natural is wildly sharp. That doesn't sound good. If I slide the fret down, it sounds wonderful. Depending on where you place the fret for different keys and different pieces, you can make things sound quite beautiful. We can either have G sharp or A flat on the first fret. If you go across the first fret, on the second chorus, E flat is by far the most common note. You don't find many B major chord with a D sharp there, very rarely. B flat, by far in a way, the most common note on the first fret of the third chorus. Those A flat, E flat, and B flat all argue for high first fret position. Now the trouble sets in. On the fourth and fifth courses, F sharp and C sharp are much more common than G flat. There just aren't many lute pieces using E flat minor chord. It just doesn't happen. D flat happens a little more frequently, but C sharp is much more common. So what is the solution? So where will you put your first fret? There is another option, which is increasingly used in the 16th and 17th century, which is called the tastino, which is a little fret, and you can have it on the fourth chorus. Same thing on the fifth chorus. Instead of D flat, same thing for G sharp. Either require tastini or slide the frets back and forth, and you can do it in the middle of pieces. In the past, lutenists had to buy millimeter paper and measure exactly where the fret positions would be, and put the millimeter paper next to the fingerboard to see where mathematically the frets would need to be. Now we can just use ClearTune to help us. We will talk more about temperament in video number 2 in this series. Be sure to check it out.